Okay, today I'm going to be making Pennsylvania Dutch chicken pot pie. In the South, we would call it more of chicken and dumplings, but there are some differences. I actually prefer the Pennsylvania Dutch chicken pot pie because I love those big square noodles. And so what I've done here is I've put some celery, I washed it first, inside of this stainless steel pot, and so that creates kind of a rack to kind of protect the chicken. And then I'm just going to put a whole chicken in here. Alright, and I'm going to put the giblets and stuff in there too, just for extra flavor. That's all going to get strained, so if that's something you don't like, it's no big deal. I've got a carton of chicken broth, and I've checked the date and I've checked the package, and I turned it upside down and everything to make sure it wasn't leaking or anything, because sometimes these things will leak, and if the container is bulging or anything a lot, there's a good chance that it's gone bad, even if the date is good on it. Of course, I've checked the date and it's good. And so now I'm just going to pour some chicken broth in here. There's lots of different ways of making this. I can't tell you how many recipes I've seen, but I like the chicken broth because it's going to have it's already going to have the salt and everything, and you want to cover the chicken with chicken broth. So I'm going to be using 2 of these, okay? And my recipe is like really almost oversimplified. It's just like super simplified. So I'm going to go with a second carton here, try to get the chicken completely covered. And if that doesn't cover it, I'll just add a little water to cover. And I have the oven preheated to 425. So now I have it all covered, and you can put carrots and onions and celery and whatnot. I just put celery in there to set the chicken on top of. But the chicken broth that I use, which is the Great Value, it already has onion and carrot and celery juices in it, and so it already has some of the flavorings. And like I said, I'm trying to make this a super simple recipe. So now I've got this in the oven at 425, and I'm going to check it in 90 minutes until the internal temperature is 180 degrees. Now, poultry calls for 165 degree internal temperature, but I go 180 because I have found that even when parts of the chicken, even the thickest parts, when they test out at 165, once you get into the taking the chicken apart and stuff, you'll find parts that aren't done. So 180 is the safest. So now I've taken a half of a 5-pound bag of potatoes and peeled them and rinsed them, and I'm chopping them into, I don't know, 1/2 inch to 1 inch cubes. And so I cut the potato, this is like a medium, 3 slices lengthwise, and then each of those in half. And then I'll go in and cut them about 1/2 inch like that. And so I want smaller chunks. You can do it however you want. Some people like big chunks. So there you can see I've cut this into thirds, and then I'm going to cut each of these in half and whatnot. So now I have a 2-pound bag of baby carrots, and I'm going to take about half of this bag, which is a pound, and I'm going to chop these carrots. I like a lot of carrots, so I have these, I've sliced these into little rounds here. I have about a pound of them. Same thing with the celery here. This is about a pound of celery, a half a stalk. Same thing with the onions here. That's 2 large Vidalia onions, by the way. So I have all my little mix here in cold water. And by the way, I'm only going to be using about half of this for the chicken pot pie, because I'm going to be using the other half in another recipe. And I figure if I'm going to get out the cutting board and the knife and blah blah blah, I'm just going to go ahead and go all out. I'm just going to chop up a bunch of vegetables, and that way I don't have to do it again. And if you're wondering why the cutting board is on a towel, it helps to keep it from slipping around and cutting your fingers off. So that's just like a little safety precaution. So now it's time to make the dough for the noodles. I have some all-purpose flour. I have 4 eggs. I have tested the eggs to make sure they're fresh. To do that, you put them in a bowl of water, and if they lay on their side, they are fresh. It needs to be cold water. If they tilt up on the end like that, they're still good, okay? But they don't have much longer. And if they float to the top, they're bad. So that's how you test your eggs. Okay, and I've got 4 tablespoons of water, and this is my roll. Okay, about the eggs, I take a little precaution with eggs. I crack them one at a time in another dish, and what I'm looking for is I'm looking for streaks of blood, red streaks, and I wouldn't use an egg like that. And so I made sure that they were all good before I combine them together. And now I'm going to put them in this bowl, and I'm going to give them a mix. So now that they're mixed up, I'm going to add my 4 tablespoons of water and do some more mixing there. Let me get this a little bit closer to the camera. Okay, so that's good. Alright, and now I've got my rings off, okay? And if I were in a commissary kitchen or restaurant kitchen, I would have gloves on, I would have my hair covered, maybe even be wearing a mask, but since I'm at home, here we go. Now, I don't really have a measurement for this. You just keep adding flour. I'm going to add about 4 tablespoons right now, 4 heaping tablespoons, okay? And you just keep adding flour until you have a pie dough consistency. And so, as you can see, I'm going to have to add more. But I find that it's so much easier just to add a little at a time, like so. And of course, you will see clumps, okay? And that's all right, because you're going to get it all worked out by the time you're done. You can sift your flour ahead of time if you like. That's completely up to you. All right, and there are so many different noodle dough recipes. I mean, you just wouldn't believe as many as there are stars in the sky. So I'm going to add 3 more here. But I like this really eggy dough, more of an egg noodle, and it is considered more traditional. But there are some that don't contain any eggs. You could also use gluten-free flour if you're gluten-free. I haven't tried that yet, but I'm going to. And as you mix, those lumps, they just disappear. And as you can see, we're not there yet. So I think we're about 7 heaping tablespoons in so far. There's 8, 9, and 10. Okay? And this is all-purpose flour. Okay? And as you can see right now, it kind of looks like cake batter. Alright, and I'm just going to keep mixing, and I'm going to keep adding. I think, like I said, I'm about 10 tablespoons in now, so this is probably about 11, 12, 13, and I'm starting to get more of the consistency, but still not quite there. So I'm just going to keep stirring and adding. I think that's about 13, so 14, 15, 16. Now, if I get it too thick, okay, I can always add a little water. It won't hurt a thing. Okay, it's starting to get there. We're starting to get stringy, okay, but it's still too sticky. We want it to be more of a dough ball, okay, and I think I said 16, 17, 18, 19. Let's try that and see what we got. I think this is going to get us there. It's getting awfully close. Alright. And at some point, you're just going to have to start using your hands, because now it's starting to really stick to the mixer, whatever you call this. Alright. And so I'm going to go for, what's that, 20, 21, 22 maybe. Alright. And now I'm just going to get in here with my hands And I'm going to keep mixing until I have, like I said, more like a pie dough. Not quite there yet. Getting there though. It's getting more like a dough, as you can see, more like a pie dough. And probably just needs maybe a couple of more tablespoons. This doesn't look like a lot, but it will be a lot once it's all rolled out and cut into squares. And I need to get some more flour, but I need to wash my hands off first because I have eggs on my hands, and if I put them in the flour, I could cross-contaminate the flour, and that really wouldn't be very wise. Okay, I added 2 more. All right, and get all that mixed in there, and I think that's going to be just about right. I have lost track of my heaping tablespoons. Okay, so maybe you were counting, maybe you weren't. That's all up to you. All right, so now I have something that I can handle. All right, and there's still a little flour left in there, and that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mold this into a ball. It's still slightly sticky, and that's okay. All right, and then I'm going to divide this into 4 sections. Actually, it's a little too sticky. Let me get this back in here. Get some more flour on it so I can handle it. Okay, so this is something that you'll just kind of learn to do by feel, okay, which is quite all right. Okay, and so still just a little sticky. Okay, let's get some more flour on there. All right, and so we're gonna have some really nice egg noodles out of this. Now you can add salt if you like. You can add about maybe half a teaspoon of salt to this mixture if you like, so that your noodles will have more flavor, but I find that they absorb the flavor of the broth and whatnot, so you know, that's completely up to you. So I think I'm going to add just a little bit more flour, so let me get my hands washed off so I can do that. Okay, I went with 1 more heaping tablespoon. All right, because I just need a little bit more so that it's not quite so sticky, so that I can work with it a little bit better. All right. And I decided I'm going to stretch this out a little bit and add just a little bit of salt. How much, I'm not sure. I guess this is just going to be like a maybe 1/4 teaspoon, half a teaspoon. I just want a little bit of salt in there, okay? And that's sea salt, all right? And it'll all get all mush-mashed in there by the time we roll it out and everything. But you can add it earlier if you like. I just decided at the last minute. I do that a lot. If you watch me cook, you'll notice that I do a lot of things at the last minute, and I change my mind a lot. So this is going to get cut into 4 sections, okay? And some people just take and twist it, okay, and do it like so. You can do it that way too, to get 4 sections out of it. But and they'll all be basically the same size, okay? And you really don't have to refrigerate it or anything like that. You can, okay? But if you do that, just know that you could have cracking of your dough while you're trying to roll it out. Okay, so now it's time to roll some dough out, all right? So I first need to flour my surface. So let me wash my hands so I can go back into the flour and get some flour on this cutting board or pastry mat. Okay, so I have this on a floured surface now, all right? And it's time to roll her out. And it's wanting to stick a little bit, so I'm going to have to flour my rolling pin a little bit more, and flour my dough just a little bit more. You know, it's different every time. And this dough hasn't been chilled, and so of course it might be a little bit more ornery too for that reason, but I'm just going to keep flouring it until it's not sticky. And just going to work in little small batches like this. You can work in bigger batches, but you have to keep in mind, you know, the size of your rolling pin and everything. And the fact that, you know, if you're using these little doodads right here, you don't want to keep rolling over your dough and cutting into your dough with your rolling pin. All right, it wants to stick, so let's put some more flour on there. Just borrow some from the pastry mat. It's perfectly fine. That rolls out like so. All right. Just keep on and on until you have a 1/8 inch thickness. Oh my goodness. And I'm going to give it a turn. Put some more flour. Spread it all around. All right. So, there we go. It's getting about the way it's going to be. I can't really get it any thinner because these little things right here stop at 1/8 inch. So, there we go. And now I'm going to take a pizza cutter. You could use a knife, but I don't want to use a knife on my pastry mat because I don't want to ruin my pastry mat. So I'm going to use a pizza cutter, and you don't have to use a lot of pressure. You just want to cut some squares, all right? And so here we go with that. Where is my pizza cutter? So now I'll show you a little something else I do. If I'm going to be storing these in the refrigerator or something for a while for some reason, it happens that sometimes I'll make the dough on one day and then make the rest of the stuff on another or whatever. I'll take a piece of parchment paper, okay, because it's, you know, pretty sturdy, and I'll flour it, okay, and it's almost the width of the pastry thing here. What do you call it? I can't remember. But anyway, so I'll take this and I'll put it on here, and this time I'm going to do more of the traditional size, which is the 2-inch, 1.5 to 2-inch squares. And oh, that's just wanting to stick. So let's put some more flour on there. All right, and we'll just keep flouring it until it doesn't stick anymore. That's basically the rule right there. All right, and then we'll go the other way. Kind of having a hard time doing this and trying to make sure I'm staying on camera too. And of course, you know, it might stick to your parchment a little bit. That's okay. Even though it was floured, it's still a little bit on the sticky side, but you know, it's gonna be all right. And so we'll just keep flouring it until, you know, it doesn't stick and whatnot. And so, you know, if you have little things like that happen, it's no big deal. You can just keep on with the job. Keep flouring your rolling pin. You might have to wipe off your rolling pin if it gets too much sticky dough on it or whatever. That way it won't keep sticking to your rolling pin, so you can just keep wiping it off and flouring it. Get that debris off. Okay, this is not an exact science. You know, have fun, and make your Pennsylvania Dutch chicken pot pie the way you want it. The size noodles that you want, the type of noodles, the ingredients in the noodles, the ingredients in your chicken pot pie. I've seen, like I said, probably 100 recipes or more. So it's getting where I can't turn this anymore. So I'm going to have to flour this just a little bit more. Like so. A little bit more flour here. Like that. So there we go. I have it all rolled out now. And I'm going to start cutting. I'm going to do like 2-inch strips this time. Okay. That might be a little bit more than 2 inches, but there we go. I can just come in smaller on this side right here, like that. And that's about 2 inches by 2 inches square. Like so. And then, if I need to put this in the refrigerator or something, I could just pick up this whole piece of parchment paper and I could put it on top of a cutting board. And I could just layer them like that as I needed to. And I have done that when necessary. Like if I'm going to be cooking, adding the noodles like a different day or something. So this is the more traditional. And some people like these noodles much thicker. Okay, I'm going with the 1/8 inch. but I have seen some really thick pot pie noodles before, and so this is more the norm. This and this. Like I said, they don't have to be perfect, but you want them, you know, the way you want them. So it's been 1 hour and 45 minutes, all right? So I'm going to remove the bird from the pot, get it out of the liquid, because I don't want to test the temperature of the meat with it sitting in the liquid, because the liquid could actually, of course, be hotter, and I wouldn't get an accurate reading. So I always calibrate my thermometers before I use them, and how you do that is you clean and sanitize it, and then you stick it in a cup of ice water and bring it down to at least 32 degrees, all right? And that calibrates it. And so now I'm ready to go around and test the meat. And when you're testing the meat, you don't want to hit the bone. And some of them will have little markings to show you the depth of how far to go in. And here you can see that little indentation right there. And so you want to go in that far, and don't touch the bone, because the bone is going to be harder than the meat. And so I'm going to test a breast. All right. Okay, it's at least 188. Yeah, so this chicken is good and done. And I'll test just various parts of it without touching the bone and whatnot. This is a thigh, I do believe. And so, okay, yeah, we're good. All right. So now I have my 7-quart bowl, okay? Then I have a strainer on top, and I'm going to take that pot and I'm going to pour all that liquid through this strainer. Then I moved my 7-quart that I used to strain the broth over to the counter, and I washed my stock pot, and I'm going to return this broth now to this stock pot. Now I have the broth back into the stock pot, and I'm going to add some water. So I added about 1.5 quarts. You could also use chicken broth if you wanted to, or chicken stock. I just chose to use the water. And now I am going to start adding some salt. Okay, I gave it a test taste before adding salt, and the broth is still just a little bit too much on the fatty side for my taste. Now, you can let this chill in the refrigerator and scrape the fat off, or you can just add some more water. In this case, I'm going to add a little bit more water. So we had 7 quarts, and then I added 1.5 quarts, and now I'm going to add another 1.5 quarts. So I'm very conservative when it comes to salt. I really don't like too much. So we have about 10 quarts of liquid here, all right, which is consists of course, the cooked chicken and all of its juices, and then 2 cartons of chicken broth, and 3 quarts of water. So we have 10 quarts here of liquid. I'm going to do 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt, and then I'm going to give this a stir, and I will give it a test taste. And if it doesn't have enough salt, I might add a little more. But what I tend to do is add what I call a baseline of salt, okay, and then let people salt their own after that, because I really can't presume how salty or not salty somebody is going to want something. So I went with a full teaspoon of salt, and that might not seem like enough, but remember, I used chicken broth, and the chicken broth had salt in it. So I don't think it's too salty. It's just about right. And I'm letting the chicken cool right now so that I can shred it. So while my chicken is cooling off, I'm going to scoop out some of this celery, potato, and carrot mixture. Okay, and I'm going to add it to this pot right here. That's 1 cup. Let's see, I'm going to go with 2 cups here. Probably going to have about 4 cups of this, because I want some of this in my chicken pot pie. Just make it taste better. All right, and I'm kind of draining the water out, like so. Okay, and then I'm going to do like a cup of onion here. Maybe just a little bit less, but I'll drain some of that water off of there. Okay, there we go. All right, and I'm going to bring this to a boil, okay? And I'm going to cook it until the potatoes are tender, and the carrots also. So I added 2 more cups of the celery, carrot, and potato mixture. So that's 6 cups, and then 1 cup of the onion. And I've got her on boil now. Now to speed up the cooling process of this chicken, I took a knife and I cut into it several different directions, and I just took my hands with gloves and I just kind of broke it apart so that the steam can escape, so that it'll cool faster. Another thing you can do is you can take like a 7-quart like this here and put some ice in it and then set this bowl down in it, and that will help it cool faster too. Matter of fact, in the restaurant business, you have 2 hours to cool something like this to 70 degrees, okay, and that's often done by an ice bath, or maybe even something called a chill stick, which is something that you stick in the middle of something that's like a liquid, like soup or stew or something like that. But anyway, you have 2 hours to get this down to 70 degrees, and then you can put it in the refrigerator when it reaches 70 degrees. And then while it's in the refrigerator, it has 4 hours to get to 41 degrees or below. And so you have to test the temperatures to make sure that those critical control points are reached so that you don't have foodborne illness, which could occur in people with compromised immune systems. I know a lot of people are like, well, I've done it this way all my life and I've never gotten sick or anything like that. But, you know, when you're serving others, you could have somebody with diabetes or HIV or hepatitis or some other illness that weakens their immune system and makes them more prone to get foodborne illness. So those are just little tips, like I said, of things that you would be concerned about, especially in a commissary kitchen or restaurant. So you may ask, why wouldn't I just take this chicken and stick it in the refrigerator? Okay, wouldn't that cool it down faster? Or in the freezer? You could if you had a blast freezer, because a blast freezer, it just works differently, but they're very expensive, like $7,000 or whatever. But the reason I can't take this chicken and put it in the refrigerator is that it's so hot that it's going to raise the temperature of the refrigerator and raise the temperature of other foods in there, like raw meat, mayonnaise, eggs, and bring them to an unsafe temperature level, which isn't good for the other foods. So that's why I'm just going to take this and put it in an ice bath in another container. Just take this container and stick it in another one that has ice in it to cool it down. That would only be if I was going to be adding this chicken to a recipe later, but I'm going to be using it immediately. So all I'm trying to do right now is get it cool enough to touch. Okay, so I was talking about if you were going to cold store the chicken overnight or something like that to use it in another recipe or whatnot. So I was kind of talking about something else there. So as soon as it gets cool enough to touch, I'm going to shred it apart and drop it in the pot over here. Now, I used the whole chicken for this, white and dark meat, but some people only like white meat or dark meat or whatever. So, you know, if you want to be a separatist, you can. Okay, so only use dark or white, whichever it is you like. But I just used the meat from a whole chicken. I mean, a whole chicken, about 5.5 pounds is about $5 or $6. And so, you know, and so I've taken all of the skin and bones out of it, and I've shredded it kind of like you would for chicken salad. So I've added the chicken, all right, and the potatoes are done. The carrots are a little al dente, but that's okay. That's why I diced them up so small, is because they take a little bit longer to cook than potatoes. So anyway, now I'm going to start adding the noodles. Okay, so it's pretty much done. All the noodles are floating to the top, and look at that pretty noodle right there. Okay, and what do I do with all those end pieces and what I call the ugly noodles? I go ahead and drop them in there. I don't waste anything, but most of them are this pretty square or rectangular shape, whatever you want to call it. And so that's it. This looks more like a soup. You wouldn't serve it with all this liquid, however. And these need to boil for about 10 minutes or so more. They've been boiling for about 5. And that's going to thicken it. But you don't serve it with a lot of broth, because then that's more like a soup. You serve it with, you basically serve more of a strained version of it. Okay, and so there it is, Pennsylvania Dutch chicken pot pie. It doesn't have a crust. Instead, it has egg noodles and Potatoes, those are optional. Some people use them, some people don't. I've seen peas and carrots. I've seen carrots and celery and onions and potatoes. I've seen every combination there is. I've seen thick noodles. I've seen thin noodles. I've seen tiny noodles, like 1/2-inch squares, and then I've seen the 2-inch squares. I have a mixture in here. So this is going to thicken, like I said, as the noodles continue to cook, and it'll be more of a stew texture. So there you have it. I just took a slotted spoon and dipped some out. And as you can see, it's not this thin, runny soup mixture because, you know, that would be considered chicken soup. It's, like I said, more of a stew. So anyway, that's it. Chicken, onions, potatoes, carrots, celery, egg noodles, chicken broth, salt, pepper to taste, maybe sprinkle some fresh parsley on top if you like it that way. So there you go, bon appetit. Last but not least, if you want to thicken something, all you have to do is pour it through a strainer, and then you have the consistency that you want. Now, it's good though to have a lot of liquid when you're boiling the noodles though, so that they have room to rise to the top and move around and do what they have to do. So anyway, I'm ready to enjoy this. I'm ready to top it with some fresh chopped parsley. Some people like it with hard-boiled egg chopped and put on top. The possibilities are endless. So it's just a delicious recipe. I just love it. And so I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great day.